Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
Good evening, everyone, to our now 5th consecutive Halloween horror episode of The Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm your Crypt Keeper, Reilly.
I'm Anthony.
I'm Diana.
And I'm Julie.
This year's double feature begins with certainly the most petrifying movie of 1964, The Gorgon. And we will wrap it all up with a film that shows the importance of power eyebrows, Blood on Satan's Claw. Our musical intro again was from George C. Music on YouTube, who creates tons of variations of the Doctor Who theme, so please make sure to check that channel out. Now, each year we select 2 horror films with a major Who connection, usually starring one of the actors that has portrayed the Doctor, and we will go through each film one by one with questions provided by me to give to the rest of the Watchers gang. So let's dive in now to our Who connections for the 2 films we've chosen. The Gorgon has Peter Cushing, of course from the Amicus Doctor Who films. Barbara Shelley, who played Carla, is going to be in a upcoming serial for us that apparently we were very close to called Planet of Fire. Michael Goodliffe, who played Professor Heights, he played Mr. Rasmussen in The Sunmakers. Michael Peake, the constable, played Tavius in The Romans.
Oh, Tavius, yeah.
Yeah. And, of course, our beloved Patrick Troughton was in The Gorgon as Inspector Kanoff. Now, Blood on Satan's Claw has a little more of a tenuous connection. Patrick Wymark, who played the judge, was considered to play the second Doctor, and I've seen this news several times when you look at past Doctor auditions and stories. They always say the person was offered the role but didn't take it, but I kind of wonder about that, or if they just auditioned for the role and weren't offered. Anyway, Barry Andrews, who played Ralph Gower, was Stott in Nightmare of Eden. I don't know if you remember him. Simon Williams, who played Peter Edmonton, played Group Captain Ian Gilmore in Remembrance of the Daleks, which is coming up, I think, probably 2 years from now for us.
Season 25. It's a minute away.
Godfrey James, who played Angel's father, which I swear that character is just credited as Angel's father. He doesn't have a name. He was Tarn in Underworld. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And, of course, Anthony Ainley is Reverend Fallowfield, and Wendy Padbury is Kathy Vespers. Now we come to a new segment for our Halloween show, and this is where we will check in with Anthony to make sure that I didn't miss any Who connections with these 2 films.
You got more than I got, but I didn't look them up. I was just going based on who I remembered being in Doctor Who.
Good. I'm glad I got that taken care of. But if you come up with any during the show, please feel free to say. Well, The Gorgon is a Hammer film from 1964 that, unlike the more well-known Hammer films, doesn't cover any of the classic horror monsters. Directed by the fantastic Terence Fisher, who is the premier director of Hammer films, and written by John Gilling and Anthony Nelson Keyes, this film got its start by a story that was submitted to Hammer from a fan in Canada named J. Lewin Devine, which is a fantastic just drag name, I would think. It would be fantastic. Hammer read the outline, liked it, created a complete script, and shot it. Now, for us, The Gorgon is a return to a more modest period for Hammer films, unlike the very nude The Vampire Lovers we watched last year. Now, The Vampire Lovers came out just 6 years after The Gorgon. It's truly amazing to think that a studio that made The Gorgon, with everything being very proper and, I guess, non-lewd, would make The Vampire Lovers in just 6 years. Also, despite it being released in England in 1964 of October, the film would not show in America till February of 1965. Now, the budget was just around £150,000, and I could not find any information as to how well it did in the box office, which probably means it did not do well. Now, reviews were generally positive, giving particular praise to the film's atmosphere, but there was some criticism of the rather predictable plot. So, now, let's venture into the deepest, starkest realms of the supernatural with The Gorgon. Now, I brought up The Vampire Lovers earlier, and I'm going to bring it up again now. Last year, my first question was, did The Vampire Lovers pass the Bechdel test? Now, obviously, this year, the Gorgon fails this test, as I don't believe any of the female characters ever talk to one another. What did you think of this extremely low amount of female characters in the film and the fact that our leading lady ends up being the monster?
Well, first off, I'm not terribly surprised because I live in Doctor Who worlds where women don't talk to each other, and usually there's not many of them. I mean, I loved and hated the fact that the leading lady ended up being the monster, but what I didn't like is having someone else play her as the Gorgon. Like, can we just keep the same actress and just put makeup on her? Because that would have been kind of cool, I guess. But in any case, I'm not terribly surprised.
Yeah, I'm not so far off from that. I particularly didn't like that, even though our romantic leading lady is the monster, because of course she is, that she doesn't even have the agency to be the monster.
Oh, that's a good point.
She doesn't even know it's happening to her.
That's a good point.
From what it seems, it's very, who knows what and what is real is very vague in this entire movie. And I didn't know what was happening a lot of the time anyway.
Well, I think what they tried to do is make a suggestion that the Gorgon spirit, Megaera's spirit, was going into other people, and that it was a very tenuous thing. And then come to find out, it's really just been going into our leading lady the entire time. And again, that's a little bit sad. Even if it was more of like a true alternate personality type of thing that happened, I could be even more okay with that. But just the amnesic part of it to then become someone else in it their entirety, that's what I really didn't like.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tired cliche.
I did think that perhaps what they were trying to do, and maybe if there was a bit more chemistry between our romantic leads, this does come across as a romantic tragedy. But I don't think the chemistry was there and it was built up enough or made it be believable that this romance was true for it to really hit home in the end.
No, the romance was stupid. That was the dumbest, shoehorned in. We have to make it romantic. I locked eyes with her across the room and I fell in love. Why do you love her? She's beautiful.
I didn't like the Paul thing. I didn't like the Namaroff thing either. That felt really awkward to me as well because, sir, you're her doctor or semi or your boss. I don't know which one, because it seemed to go back and forth between she's a patient and she's his.
It was giving real Munchausen's by proxy.
I was bringing up the tragic element because trying to, I guess, defend the film, I am a sucker for these Hammer films. I was thinking of the wonderful romantic tragedy that is David Cronenberg's The Fly, which really does a great job of doing that. But there, the chemistry between Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis is out of this world. It's amazing. So it probably works a lot better in that film than here.
I'm going to be honest, Reilly. I think this is not an S or A tier Hammer film.
Oh,
this is fairly low on the totem pole by their standards, I think.
True. Yeah, I could agree. I mean, we had seen others that I'm sure we would think were better. Let's delve in a little bit more into the film, and let's bring up, of course, our favorite, Patrick Troughton. He plays Inspector Kanoff, and he plays him as an irritable, pragmatic inspector. And this is quite a departure from how he portrays the Doctor. Now, there is a similarity that he plays with the same severity as he did Father Brennan in The Omen, which we did like that performance. So were you okay with his performance in this film? Was it just classic Troughton bringing it, or did you feel like he was weighed down with, I guess, a poor, predictable plot or poor writing?
Honestly, it felt like the only character that was real. Everything else was kind of madness around him. And here's this corporate police officer doing his job. Please don't make me do more paperwork. I have a big spike on my hat. The cop and the professor are the two highlights of this movie. And the rest of it kind of made me question your sanity.
See, I was going to make a really poor joke of he was weighed down by his helmet.
Oh, no, that's
great.
That's great.
But yeah, he is one of the better performances. You can tell that he's probably one of the best actors there. Yes, I know we have Christopher Lee and we have Cushing as well, which obviously they're good. Peter Cushing did a good job, but I hated his character.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I land with him. And then Christopher Lee comes in not looking like Christopher Lee.
Like you said, that was Christopher Lee, and I gasped. I didn't clock him at all. And I kept wondering, this guy is so good.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in the same spot.
So obviously Troughton does a really good job. I would probably liken it to in Enemy of the World.
Yeah, I see that.
When he plays that other character,
Salamander.
his doppelganger. Yeah, that's kind of what I picture him a little bit as in this one.
I mean, I've said it before on the show, I think probably when we were in the Troughton era, but I genuinely believe that Patrick Troughton is one of the two most capable actors to ever play the part of the Doctor. The other one being Peter Capaldi.
Oh, I agree on that one completely. Because he's my favorite. Unfortunately, from when I do my research to find Doctor Who horror films, I had been holding on to the Gorgon for a while because I knew Patrick Troughton had a decent amount of screen time in it. I believe this is the last we're going to have of him on our horror show. I don't think there is anything else other than maybe a very small bit part.
Well, now we're sad, Reilly.
I know. Well, I'm going to bring up the mood.
We'll see about that.
There is a lot of plotting that happens behind the scenes in this one. So let's try to follow through here. Namaroff tries to hide the death that happened by turning to stone. Namaroff is also aware that Megara is a spirit which can take over other human bodies. Now, Carla arrived to the fictitious town of Van Dorf as an amnesiac right before the first murder. This, of course, leads to a lot of questions. Did Namaroff discover Carla as the vessel of Megara and bring her back to the town Van Dorf? If Namaroff is correct and that the spirit can occasionally take over the body of a human being, does it have to possess her? Could it possess other people? Could it possess anyone? Was Carla lying when she told Paul that Namaroff was in love with her and she was scared of him, but so she could try to get an escape because she knows that Namaroff was about to, I guess, kill her because she was Megara and he was tired of covering for her? I mean, there's a lot going on. And then on top of what you were mentioning about Inspector Cunoff, how he just didn't want to do any work. And in the first part of the film, it's a conspiracy of all the locals to not want to do anything about the first two deaths. Like I said, a lot is going on in the background. Do you have any sort of like working idea of what the motivations were for Carla and Namaroff? Because I find those to be particularly confusing.
No. And here's why I don't care.
Okay. There you go.
If there's so much going on behind the scenes where we are left without actually being given enough information to infer these things, that's a problem. That is a bad script.
From what I understand, Carla comes in not 100% from amnesia. She comes in, from what I understood, she wanted to move there and be a nurse. And that was her original intent of moving to Van Dorf. And then she had an amnesic episode, and that lasted for 2 years until Namaroff was able to fix things. Unless I missed something. That was what I understood. And so I see it more of Namaroff realizing something had happened with his nurse and was trying to figure it out. And I think Carla is some sort of specific vessel because she's the only one that's implied to have housed Megara.
Okay.
But I could be wrong, but I don't recall them actually coming out and saying it. I think that Namaroff was trying to imply it could be someone else to take away from Carla.
Okay. Right.
I think that's why he liked having the original patient running about, and why he didn't want her killed was because she was a convenient scapegoat if he needed her. Or at least that's the only reason I can come up with that she would have been ever featured in any part of this movie.
Did you think that Namaroff really did love Carla then? That's why he was protecting her? Or he just had a more scientific interest?
I think that it was intentionally left ambiguous, and therefore I didn't think too hard about it.
Okay.
Creepy either way.
Yeah, it's creepy either way, but I dislike the love aspect of it, mainly because why would you do that to someone that you love? Why would you keep her there? Why wouldn't you move away and not have her turn into Megara? Because it seemed more connected to the place than anything. So yeah.
Yeah, like move towns.
Yeah, if you actually loved her, move away.
It's also the whole thing where if you get bitten by the zombie, tell people. If you know that your buddy has been bitten by the zombie, shoot him in the forehead. Like, I know that it sucks, but I don't ever like a plot really carried on the back of, I didn't let people know about the bite. You know, that trope in storytelling gets on my last nerve. Don't like it.
Diana, your beginning statement there makes a great PSA for the Halloween season.
Absolutely. If you get bitten, let someone know. If your friend gets bitten, shoot them in the forehead. Unless it was consensual, then that's okay. Zombie bites rarely are.
Okay, I think that's the title. So,
zombie bites are rarely consensual.
Mostly because they don't necessarily usually have the neurological function to be able to ask anymore.
Yeah, warm bodies might get you somewhere, but that's about it.
I know, that one I actually found interesting because it decided to do a different kind of take on zombies.
Exactly.
I brought up earlier that this film is unusual and that it doesn't deal with a typical horror monster. It deals with basically a Gorgon, Greek mythological creature. So I'm going to ask you, do you think there are any other mythological creatures, Greek or otherwise, which could get this type of treatment?
All of them. They're
All of them.
terrifying.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh my God. Are you kidding? Zeus is running around raping women as a swan.
But do you think it's possible to transplant that into contemporary times?
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, yeah. Now, do I think that they could do a much better job than what happened here? Absolutely. But I think you could make a plot like this work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You've got Percy Jackson. You bring everything mythological into a modern era. It works really well there, and it's not horror, but you can probably easily change it into more of a horror element.
Yeah, another example, Chaos on Netflix. Greek mythology in the modern era. It's fantastic.
I feel like we surprised you, Reilly.
You did, because I was expecting everyone to mention ridiculous creatures, but you actually gave very good, correct, like, here's our point. This is true. And I completely agree. I had not seen Chaos, and I am slightly familiar with Percy Jackson, but I've not seen it because I think it was past my generation by a few years when it started. So
I read the books. Sometimes I'll read books geared towards younger audiences, partially just to kind of keep up with what has come out since I was a kid. And I read the first series of them, and they were really well done.
I was about to say, because sometimes they're also a real good time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. One thing I thought was interesting, now we're getting particularly on Greek mythology, is that in the film, I'm pretty sure that they named the three Gorgon sisters as Tisiphone, Medusa, and Megara. But when I looked that up on Wikipedia, that is not the names that were listed. I don't know why they would have changed that. Maybe because it sounded easier. It was easier for the characters to say. I don't know, but I just thought that was bizarre. So the three monstrous sisters, the Gorgons, are Medusa, Pheno, and Reilly, I believe, and I'm not butchering this pronunciation, but that is not Tisiphone or Megara. So I don't know why they changed it. Thought that was bizarre.
Yeah, because Megara is a Greek mythological figure.
As is Tisiphone.
So yeah, that's just weird. Despite their incorrect Greek mythology and a very hard to understand plot based off their characters' motivations, this is where everyone gives me their positive reviews. What did you think of the Gorgon, everyone?
Meh.
Meh. Okay.
That's my review, my one-word review.
I guess that is not a recommend for the watchers, listeners.
Not from me.
All right.
There are much better Hammer movies out there.
So I am limited in the sense that I can probably tell you that I've watched less than maybe 15 horror movies in my entire life. Maybe 3 in the past 2 years, 3 of which were 4, because all 4 have been for this show. So I would give it a no. I did not have a good time. And in fact, I would have told you I really hated it.
Wow.
And then I watched the next one.
Wow. Okay. Julie?
I probably wouldn't recommend. I thought the pacing was bad. The plot had so many holes. I had to headcanon a lot of things. And there's a few good actors, but overall it's kind of meh. And I mean, the atmosphere is the one thing it has going for it. Because again, if nothing else, Hammer can pull off some scary castles at night.
I do want to add to the pacing comment, because I made the mistake of watching this on Plex, which inserts ads into it. So you have the already kind of torturous pacing that's then supplemented by periodic breaks, and I completely lost interest by the end. Completely.
Julie brought up the point that I was going to make. I do understand how this film is really more for a person who loves Hammer and is jonesing to see a Hammer film they had not seen before. But once again, the atmosphere was delightful and wonderful, and it's good to see Cushing. It's good to see Christopher Lee. So to me, it's of course not as good as other Hammer horror films, but it is just nice that it's there to watch as something new. That is a wrap on the Gorgon. let's head to the lobby.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
We're back, and we're going to talk about The Blood on Satan's Claw. Blood on Satan's Claw is a 1971 film directed by Piers Haggard. The cinematographer was Dick Bush. No judgments.
I'm a mature, responsible adult, I promise.
This film was originally conceived as an anthology of 3 stories set in the Victorian era. Each story would be representative of an evil force entering into the community. Instead, we got one film with one story that then incorporated those separate stories as scenes. So, for example, the scene where the furry clawed arm is strangling a character in bed, that was its own one-off story, as well as the bizarre face found in a field. Now, they asked Peter Cushing to be in this and Christopher Lee. Cushing refused due to his wife being ill, and they couldn't get Christopher Lee, well, because he cost too much. So
I'm glad they both couldn't do it. I have opinions about this.
Okay. This film received mixed reviews and on a budget of £82,000 did not do well at the box office. Over time, though, this film has gotten more attention by film reviewers as an example of British folk horror, like the classic film The Wicker Man, not the Nicolas Cage one, the original. It was received a re-review by critics after it was brought up in Mark Gatiss' History of Horror documentary, which I highly recommend. Now, after talking to my fellow watchers and getting the vibe of how I think this film was received, I think I'm going to have to just double down now with something that might make this discussion even worse. So, Anthony Ainley, who played, of course, the Reverend that the character Angel tried to seduce, was quoted in an interview as saying, and I quote, "When it came to doing the nude scene where Angel comes into the rectory at night and disrobes, this was done at least 3 times, and Linda was spot on with every take. She was a total professional with a refined sense of the erotic, unusual for her age. I believe she was only 17 at the time." End of quote. I looked it up. And she was. So, yikes. If he wasn't your favorite master before, I don't think that's going to improve anything. So, I've come to realize that the true horror of this episode is that I inflicted these films upon you. So,
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
I actually liked The Blood on Satan's Claw.
Oh, shock and surprise. The men liked it and the women didn't.
I have lots of things to say.
well, so let's all check our backs and legs for the devil's skin to talk about The Blood on Satan's Claw. Now, I believe this is the only true historical horror movie that we've covered. Mm-hmm. And just before we get into the other stuff, let's just talk about the historical setting and how they portrayed it. Did they do a good job? Did you actually feel that you were in 18th century England?
Oh, because they mentioned like the one time, like, oh, the king is living out in exile. That's how we know.
And the bad wigs and the weird getup.
Wigs.
They were such bad wigs. But yeah, it was passable as a different era of England. Just their costuming was a little bit meh, but I believed it.
I'll agree with Julie's assessment on that.
Since I'm such a big fan of historicals, I had no idea if they did or not.
Okay, there's doing it right. There's making it work. And then there's just like, I'm also trying to get over other things than just believing that it's 18th century England. Okay.
I don't think I thought too hard about what century it was. It was in ye olde times.
In ye olde times.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I got the vibe.
All right. Anthony Ainley, let's try to forget his earlier quote. Let me just, when you come up with your answers to this, what did you think of his performance? I actually thought that I preferred his performance in this than how he does the master.
Oh, yeah. My immediate reaction was, oh, so he can act.
Again, didn't realize it was him until afterwards.
I looked up on IMDb. I was like, what character does he play and what does he look like? Reverend? Okay, I know where to find him. And yeah, good job. Wasn't insane.
Yeah, it's funny how we oftentimes can pick him out in caked on latex makeup, but here we didn't recognize him and he was just there, clear to be seen.
I mean, part of it's the wig. Part of the reason I wasn't clocking him was that crazy wig.
Wait, that wasn't his real hair?
I mean, maybe it was.
If that was his real hair, I have some questions, and he should go see someone else to get his hair done. Very poor stylist there.
Let's talk about the music a little bit. It was done by Mark Wilkinson, who apparently did a lot of abstract work in the theater, music-wise, that is. And the music in this film has a real playful, sinister kind of vibe to it, especially with that repeating flute motif, which could come across as maybe a little bit grating. So we'll start off with Julie, since she is our music expert. What do you think? Did it hit or miss the mark?
This is the only thing that was redeeming of this whole film.
Wow, okay.
Okay, maybe not the only thing, but this ranked very high up there, and I really enjoyed the music. I think it worked really well. I was also afraid that it was going to get too grating, because at the beginning I was like, this could be a bit much, but they did a good job of cutting out all sound and all music when they didn't need it. And so they chose correctly when to play music. And that's my stance.
Anyone else?
I defer to our musical expert.
You don't even want to attempt to say anything?
I didn't really notice the music, which means it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either.
And while I don't normally notice music, I am not a good fit for watching horror movies because I just don't like so much about standards of the genre. And I don't like playful background music in a somebody is being murdered, stalked, mutilated sense that horror movies love to do, because apparently that is a good time for some people. It is not for me. And it makes my whole inside self very confused, and I don't like the feeling that it elicits. And so I do not enjoy playful music over big scary.
I think it works in certain times. And so I enjoyed it in this one because I think this truly was, because they were teenagers and because of how they were acting and things like that. I think the playfulness in some ways worked because of the content and everything. You can't just throw playful music into any horror film. I agree with you on that. It's overused, but I think it works here.
You brought up the Utes, to quote my cousin Vinny, and I'm glad you did, because I wanted to touch on the idea that this film really does seem to try to tap into a very conservative fear around 1971, and that is the kids are not all right. They're turning into hippies. They're being revolutionary. We got to keep an eye out on them. This film really does try to tap in on.
No, they don't. It does a very poor job. Okay. Here's my real stance on why I got really frustrated with this film. A lot of times you have some situations where you've got the stories that are not the horror stories where, okay, they say they're all witches, but they're not actual witches. Okay, cool. That goes into we're delving into human nature. Great. You get the horror side of things where it's like, okay, there's something specific that is driving them towards this, or there's something about the human nature of the people who currently live there that has driven them to go into the witchcraft and everything. And in this story, it's legitimately a normal town, nothing crazy. Everyone seems to be kind of good with each other, except, okay, the judge is a little bit of a dick, but he comes and goes, and so he's not always there. Okay. And so I don't understand what the movie is trying to accomplish. They just decided that we're going to take this random town, we're going to make crazy things happen, but it's not actually delving into any human nature. It's not delving into any remotely worthwhile thing other than, okay, these people are bad, these people are good, and now we've just killed a monster by the end.
Julie, I think you're expecting too much from a movie made in 1971.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think there are films that can really touch on real drama that could follow this type of genre. I really do. I understand Julie's point there in that there's no morality question. There's no inner conflict. It's really just this invading demonic force comes in and starts possessing people, and just a battle to see if it can be stopped or not.
There's no rhyme or reason as to who it's really happening to, because I truly think that Ralph, I think was his name, he's too old. So if it was just about the youths, I questioned that. And then also there were two old people who were with all the youths. And I was like, that's really weird.
And they kept zooming in on them like they were important.
Yes.
I think they were trying to do the Steve Buscemi, hey, fellow kids thing. I think that's what they were trying to do.
And so there was no rhyme or reason. There was nothing that was like, this is going to cause you to get possessed, which, okay, sure, maybe it's not something specific. Then why wasn't everyone possessed by the end? There has to be some kind of reasoning behind it, unless the whole town goes crazy, which they didn't. And it wasn't even geared towards just the youths. And so that's why I don't like that argument of it was just about the youths, because you threw in some old people for no reason and Ralph for no reason. It just felt like it was all for nothing.
And everything was all starting it off with the weird old judge being like, hey, you strumpet, you have to go live in the cabinet under the stairs. What happened to her? And then they go put her in Bedlam?
What also didn't make sense to me, so it starts with Ralph finding it in the yard, right? Because he plowed it over it and found it. And then all of a sudden it's living in the floorboards of the attic.
Right.
How in the world did it go from there to there?
How did you get up there, little devil?
That makes no sense. And I don't know. It's all over the place.
My best defense I could give, and I'm not necessarily saying that Blood on Satan's Claw is a film that I really, really like. It's just a film that I do remember seeing so long ago, and I couldn't even remember very much about it.
Obviously, because there's a certain scene we'll get to that I have questions.
Yes, and that's where we're coming up to. But maybe in a slight defense, they're trying to do a dream nightmare logic thing where it just kind of floats around, and so you don't have any answers as to why you have this face in a field that leads to a hairy arm trying to strangle someone in a bed, and why did they suddenly turn on the fiance, and when she's walking away, she suddenly has claws for fingers. And maybe that's it. I'm just giving it as much benefit there.
And honestly, it's one of those things that I find curious that it's supposed to be considered one of these predecessors or early versions of folk horror for England. Okay, so it's set in the countryside, but like that's not...
Yeah, they never named it.
Yeah, there was no connection. They kept being like, whoa, maybe it's witchcraft. And then big old judge is like, witchcraft's been stamped out. I read one page of a book. I'm going to have to go deeper and darker than anyone's ever been before. And all it is a fancy claymore that's a very thin blade.
And if they had gone into some sort of backstory and it being like a Knights Templar or some old thing that has this historic meaning that then ties into this monster that was from that time period and everything like that, okay, sure, I can understand the folklore of it, but it doesn't tie into anything that, at least to my knowledge, that is English folklore. Anthony, are we missing something?
No. I think the references to witchcraft, fundamentally, witchcraft was never thoroughly stamped out in England, even when it was made illegal. There is, in traditional witchcraft and not Wicca, a veneration of Lucifer. In fact, traditional witchcraft venerated two gods. One was Lucifer and the other one was actually Diana, not our Diana, but...
Heck yeah, it was. I'm the reincarnation, bitch. No, I don't know.
But there is some ties into English witchcraft, particularly in the early part of the 20th century. You got Graham Gardner, who's widely seen as the founder of Wicca, who went and found a coven in the New Forest. So I can look at the lore here and loosely draw it.
See, I would agree with you, except for the fact that it never really seemed to establish a coven. It never really established any rules about it. They were just these children doing it because of this monster, and they wanted to recreate him, but not have anything else that seemed remotely like really, truly like witch-like, in my opinion.
Fundamentally, I didn't think about this too hard when I watched it. I watched it, I enjoyed it, I didn't question much, because I know these kind of movies tend to fall apart if you blow on the plot too hard.
I was lost from the second that he told that girl she had to go sleep upstairs. How dare she ask to sleep in his house? I was like, from the get-go, I was like, what the fuck am I watching? From scene to scene, there were no transitions. It was like 1 second you're in the field, 1 second you're in the new church, 1 second you're in the old church. Now you're back in the attic. Now there's a hairy beast coming out of the floorboards, and now he's not there. Is he real? Is he not? Is he Nothing was coherent.
Nothing made any sense. I mean, Roger Daltrey was plowing a field at the beginning of the film. No one could explain that.
That's the only part that made sense. He's a man in that time period. Yeah, he's going to be plowing a field.
And it's 1971 and he's going to look like Roger Daltrey.
I need to make a comment about Roger Daltrey being a rock star and plowing because, groupies.
Wait, as a rock star?
Yeah, Roger Daltrey from The Who.
Lead singer.
Oh,
Yeah.
I missed that.
We have watched several horror films over the years, all with a different tone and feel. Blood on Satan's Claw is, safe to say, the most aggressive and severe we have watched. And I'm, of course, talking about the very intense murder of Wendy Padbury's character, Kathy Vespers. I am opening the floor to your discussion about this.
Are you referring to this rape scene?
Yeah, rape and murder.
Just call it out.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we're not monetized, so we can say the word freely, can't we?
Yeah. I'm not going to lie, it was really hard watching Zoe get raped.
Yeah, see, here's the thing is that I have seen a lot of horror movies, and I've seen those that are as tame and, as some mentioned, boring as the Gorgon, and I've seen stuff that is pretty intense. And so it all kind of comes out in the wash for me at the end, especially if I haven't seen a film in a while. But I had not seen this film probably since we started doing the podcast. So then when I watch it now and I see it's Wendy Padbury, I'll just tell the listeners, I immediately texted everybody, oh, hey guys, I forgot about this. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was very grateful for that text.
Yeah.
By the way.
I watch a lot of modern things, right? Have scenes with it, and there's different ways of handling it. And there's a lot of scenarios that there's parts of Outlander where there's a lot of disassociation that happens in the way that they filmed it. And so it's not as visually jarring, I suppose, as it was in this one because of how much skin they showed, by how much they really got into the eyes of the guy who was going to do it to her. And so this one made me more uncomfortable than a lot of other scenes I've seen in more modern storytelling. And I think part of it is they found just other ways to address it so it's not as intense as it was in this scene. I was not very happy with this scene. To be perfectly honest, it was a struggle.
I fast forwarded through it because I don't feel like rape has a place in the way that we show and dramatize things on television right now. It's never used in any way, shape, or form that is anything more than the glorification of sexual violence. That's what this was. And that's one of the reasons I don't dabble a lot in horror blindly, is because you don't ever really know where you're going to stumble into the side of horror that glamorizes sexual violence against people, but mostly women. And it was wholly unnecessary.
Yes.
They could have just murdered her. It still would have done a lot of the similar work without being traumatizing.
Correct.
And it was just totally unnecessary, and almost always is.
Every other person that ended up either getting maimed or killed for either their claw, their hand, their piece of skin, they were killed or just maimed in some other way. And what reason did we decide that we needed to pick this one character and make it more than that?
That's a very fair point.
There was no reason. I agree with Diana completely.
I'm going to guess it was primarily to traumatize Doctor Who fans.
Well, it's very interesting because, as I would say, the resident horror expert here, I had noticed that in horror, rape in particular really got into a very nasty vibe in horror films around this time. Last House on the Left, I think there's one other that cannot come to my mind, but it was right around this period of like very late 60s, early 70s. But then for some reason, it just really disappeared. Or if it was done with a little bit more artistic style and something that was integral to the plot, like Rosemary's Baby. And that was before this period because that was a bit earlier in the 60s. So it is very bizarre how this film and others right around that period seem to have just a very terrible way of doing it.
I do wonder, culturally, coming to the end of the 60s, women's liberation had had a huge swirl of support in the 60s. So what's possibly the worst thing you could do in the wake of that? It's rape. It's intended purely to shock.
Yeah, exploitative.
Rape is never pleasant in horror. I'm going to take a step back and say that before I say what I'm about to say. But when it's someone like Wendy Padbury, who, when this was made, this was only 18 months after she'd left Doctor Who, she looks very young. It feels especially awful because of that. There's a big difference in the scales in horror, right? You look at something like The Evil Dead, someone gets raped by tree roots because satanic tree. Big difference from gang of teenagers raping one of their own. One is very clearly farcical. The other one does and can happen in the real world. Yeah.
Ooh. Well, my lesson here is to pre-screen the films, no matter if you remember watching them, because I honestly, maybe I blocked it out when I saw it many years ago, and I just thought I remembered it. I knew that Wendy Padbury's character was murdered, but I completely forgot the rape element. And so when I got there, I was like, oh, shit. Oh, God. Okay, great. Too late now. Guess we're doing this film, so there we are. I'm going to try to lighten the mood if it's possible. I'm going to try. And I would want to bring up that Blood on Satan's Claw came out in 1971. Now, there's a scene in the film where the character of Margaret, one of the youths, gets chased through the woods by some villagers who believe she is a witch, and they toss her into the river, and they start talking about whether she's a witch depending on whether she drowns or not. My question for you is that Blood on Satan's Claw came out in 1971. Monty Python and the Holy Grail came out in 1975. Did Monty Python get the idea for the witch joke from this movie scene?
Well, that's how they did it. That was one of the things that they used to do was drowning piece. So it's like partially from this, but partially just from history.
Well, I wonder if any of you, when that scene happened and they were having a discussion of whether if she floats, yes or no, and they're going through the logical discussion of it, did anyone ever get a chuckle out of it and look at it as kind of a comedic scene at that point?
Oh, I totally did. I had the same moment where I went, were the Pythons watching this shit? Because there was just that gaggle of idiots. You had never seen them before. They were not central to the plot. You don't really see them again. Who knows why they're suddenly chasing this girl from, well, because they think that she's a witch. And for them to just all stand around with not two thoughts between the like 8 of them, scratching their heads, looking like total idiots. And what's his face? Pretty boy is like, shouldn't we think about helping her? Meanwhile, he's also watching her drown. I definitely had shades of Monty Python, and that this is what they were spoofing.
This film is bizarre in that its plot device is that you can tell who was possessed or is about to be possessed when they start basically getting some goat hair growing on them. So did you think that was hilarious, awkward, scary maybe, or none of the above?
Wildly uncomfortable.
Now that strange growth makes a lot more sense.
Oh, okay. Again, because it wasn't really firmly established of what was going on, it was really rather uncomfortable because 1, gross, 2, oddly placed, right?
Yes.
I don't understand the thought process around where things were placed on various people. What I also found interesting is the master of the house, the guy who was a fiancé, and he gets his arm lopped off. Well, he cuts his own arm off. And then when he comes back, he seems really too nonchalant about it in some regards. He's just like riding a horse. I'm like, if you just had your arm taken off, you wouldn't be riding a horse immediately because you...
No, it's just a flesh wound, Julie.
No.
We're going back to Monty Python.
But that'd have been gangrene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just needed to have a waxing should have been invented back then, and that could solve all the problems of the film.
I honestly didn't like in the Diana has texture issues category of also why I don't do horror movies. When they got the chunk of the fur skin off of Margaret's leg and they give it to the judge and he's like flapping it around his face and like his mouth and his nose like he needs to taste it. And I was like, this is way too much.
All right, new metric, the Diana uncomfortable count.
I was simultaneously stuck between utter disgust and overwhelmed and uncomfortable throughout the entire film.
He's not just a judge of law, he's also a judge of cuisine.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, God. Now you've made Diana throw up.
And where did his wife go?
Good question.
She just wandered off.
I think he got pissed and locked her up in the attic with the fiance.
Well, except she kept saying, it's been a hard day for me today because he was sad, apparently, that his wife poofed.
Also, now that we're wrapping up and we're talking about the judge, the climactic scene where obviously the devil, which is kind of a furry devil who looks kind of like a bat. Not the best costume there, but it's kind of strange why the judge is just, it's almost like you feel like he's done this several times and he just really enjoys it. And he's like, oh man, you can't just jump right in there and start hacking away. You got to wait till they're right at like the height of this ritual. And that's when it's at its best, when you go in there and start chopping them up. It was just so bizarre. And then the slow motion as well.
I was expecting anything other than a claymore. Just because he kept being like, I'm packing the heat. No one's ever seen the depths of which I'm going to go. And then it's just a claymore.
It was so over the top. I was just like, I don't know what has happened. And okay, this is just how we're going to end this. Let's just get this done.
Well, that is a good segue to our last question. So I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark here. Actually, I'm going to change my question. I'm going to ask you this instead. I'm not going to ask whether you like the Blood on Satan's Claw. You can say what you think about it, but I'm more interested to know, which one did you prefer between the two, the Gorgon or Blood on Satan's Claw?
Blood on Satan's Claw, because it at least kept my interest.
I'm going to say the Gorgon.
The Gorgon, because when I look back at it, getting the two different sides of horror, not being a horror connoisseur, the Gorgon falls into that. I'm not sure if it is parody, satire, or the thing that satire is satiring. And so in that regard, I could probably rewatch it and have a good time.
The Gorgon is definitely entry-level horror.
Yeah. For future reference, I don't fuck with this Blood on Satan's Claw shit. This is the shit that I do not go to the films. I do not go to the movies. I do not watch this shit. This is, listeners, part of the poll tax and the slave agreement that I made to be here. Is to watch the Blood on Satan's Claw.
Wow, Diana.
I prefer the Gorgon.
I feel a bit insulted with the slave reference. Oh, boy.
Oh, I apologize. What is this collar on my neck?
Anthony Ainley was there in The Master, so I'm surprised it wasn't mind control.
Obviously, Angel is clearly in the Master's sex dungeon now.
Angel and Adric sitting in a tree.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the youths, because of the time period and the haircuts and like their little basic outfits, it made me feel like there was a bunch of little Adrics running around.
Same. Mm-hmm. There were a couple moments where I thought Adric would fit in just nice.
But when you think about that, that is truly terrifying. Just a bunch of Adrics running around the woods.
Honestly, yeah. Doesn't make the story any better.
Well, from Greek mythology to folk history, from little snakes for hair to furry skin patches, and from Christopher Lee being in your movie to almost Christopher Lee being in your movie, we have completed our horror double feature this year. It was a slog, but we did it. So when the sun starts setting earlier and the leaves begin to turn into autumn brown, why not sit back and watch a classic horror movie? But probably not of either one of these two. From all of us watchers in the fourth dimension, enjoy your spooky season. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Anthony Williams, Julie Philippek, Diana Burney, and myself, Reilly Schreck. This bonus episode, Zombie Bites Are Rarely Consensual, was recorded on Wednesday, the 8th of October, 2025. If this is your first time listening in, all of our previous episodes are available through your favorite podcasting app. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and leave us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, you can pick your friends and you can pick your horror films, but you should always screen the horror films you pick for your friends.